A very good morning and welcome to Newsline here on News First. It's a bright Friday morning, which is great because it's the end of the week and everyone is looking forward to the weekend. But we're here to give you some informed details, an informed start to the day as you head into your Friday. Well, joining me today on the program is two very eminent personalities. One is Mr. Bandala Jayasekara. He is a former diplomat and a journalist. And also our guest today is the founding editor of the Daily Island and the Sunday Island from 1981 to 1986. And the Sunday Times founding editor from 1987 and 1991. He is most commonly known for his work in the publishing industry and for really creating a giant publishing house in Sri Lanka, and he's none other than Mr. Vijitha Yapa. A very good morning to both you gentlemen.
Good morning, my name.
Bandala, I'll let you take over from here.
And I'm filling in for the great Faraj Shaukat Ali.
Bandala, you'll be taking over from
for 12 days.
For a couple of days.
Vijitha, now, yesterday was J.R. Jayawardena's birth anniversary. J.R. was more known as the old fox. Yes. This old fox changed the political landscape, and you were very closely associated with J.R. What happened?
Well, closely associated in the sense as a journalist, not as a politician, luckily. But he was certainly an amazing man. Unfortunately, he came to power too late, I think. He should have got into power much earlier.
But Ranil doesn't think so.
Ranil doesn't think so. But, I mean, certain things I knew that some of the decisions that he was making were very, very wrong. I don't think he'd have made them earlier. But he was an amazing personality. He knew how to get on with people. I remember being in Dhaka for the SAARC opening conference, and the speech he made, just off the cuff. And Rajiv came immediately and said, fantastic speech.
And also, Vijitha, now we are talking about America, how our close relationship with America. Now, if you go back, I remember now, he went, none other than Ronald Reagan invited him, the Rose Garden, where Frank Sinatra sang for JR, his favorite song, My Way. And that time we had a very eminent journalist, former editor of the Daily News, Ernest Correa, who was as the ambassador. Yeah. And that was the only time a Sri Lankan leader was recognized by the Americans. What happened since then? Well, and let's not forget that he was known as Yankee Dicky.
I think the most important thing is the question of PR is an important factor for any leader. I'm not talking about hiring PR people paying fantastic amounts in America. It's not that. There is a certain personal relationship that's needed, the question of trust. Lakshman Kadiragama was that way very, very successful. He knew how to get on with people. With Colin Powell, for instance. When he met him, I can't remember the exact incident, but they talked about a certain thing, and when Lakshman came back, he got a photograph of that
famous tree at the President's house. And then let me also add that I had gone with Mr. Kadiragama to Washington. Yeah. And that time, that's where Colin Powell hugged Mr. Kadiragama. And for a moment, he forgot, Mahina, that he was the all-powerful American Secretary of State. He said, we islanders. That's really how.
That was the sort of relationship, actually, if you look back to the 70s and the 80s, that our heads of states really shared with these political powerhouses. Like even if you take Mrs. Bandaranaike and Indira Gandhi, for instance, they shared a very close relationship. They had a lot of things in common. They both lost their husbands. So these relationships are very strong back in the day. But was foreign policy based on these personal sort of relationships that these head of states had with each other?
This is, if you look at JR, one of the major mistakes he made, I think, was supporting Britain with regard to the Falkland Islands. That was based on a personal friendship.
But also antagonizing Mrs. Gandhi and Sanjay Gandhi.
Yeah, that was another issue. Right?
But Vijitha, coming back, now you see, like, okay, after that, I think Ranil Wickremesinghe had some meetings with George Bush. But I'll also tell you another incident. That time, I think that happened, I feel, it's more than Ranil Wickremesinghe because of Milinda Maragoda. Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, individuals have certainly helped. But I think we need to get all individuals who can help in such situations to work with us. And that's the important thing. I mean, when I say us, I mean Sri Lanka.
Then also about now nepotism. Now JRJ had a very famous full-page ad Mahina at that time. I have nobody to protect, no family to protect. All that he had that because Ravi Jayawardena didn't get involved except that he built up the STF. But didn't he train and wanted to groom his nephew, Ranil Wickremesinghe?
I think there was certainly some grooming, but at the same time, I don't think it was a full-hearted effort as far as Ranil was concerned, because there were others. I mean, if you look at Premadasa, JR gave full support to Premadasa. A lot of people are saying all sorts of things about Premadasa, but he gave him the full support.
And Premadasa, there was Gamini Disanayake and there was Lalita Atlathmudali.
Yeah.
And also, Vijita, now, unlike the present leaders, I mean, after JR, nobody groomed the second, third line of leadership. Where JR Jayawardena let Premadasa handle Gamudawa. Mahapula was done by Lalit as well as Swarna Bhumi by Gamini. But why weren't these leaders very insecure since then?
I think there was a certain amount of insecurity also. I mean, if you look at President Premadasa, for instance, who was going to be Prime Minister during his term. So there was Lalita Atlathmudali who campaigned heavily for him, and also Gamini Disanayake. So he called both of them to Sucharita, and then he said, okay, there's a room there, you go in there and you decide which one of you should be the Prime Minister. So they argued and argued and argued and then came out and said, no, we can't take a decision. Okay, in that case you leave it to me. And he appointed D.B. Vijayathandra, his close friend.
So but Premadasa complained during JR that I'm like a peon. So this peon concept of the Prime Minister came after that, is it?
Yes, well, after he became the President, then the Prime Minister thing was relegated to the bottom line. So that's the unfortunate thing, to the bottom rung, sorry. And but it has basically remained that even during Mahinda Rajapaksa's time, the Prime Minister was not all that well known, not so much in the public eye, except in Sri Lanka, but outside, Prime Minister was hardly known.
But
the other side is that in the case of the former President, for instance, it was his family who were immediately there. In the case of Jayawardena, there was nobody. In the case of Wickremesinghe also, there is nobody from his immediate family. So it's an interesting
sort of mix, isn't it, Bandula? Because, I mean, tracing back history, we're seeing actually not a repetition, but a somewhat of really mixed sort of a history that is unfolding. I mean, now we see family not much in the limelight, and now we see more light shed on the Prime Minister.
But isn't it a strong combination? You have Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe. So this time the Prime Minister is not a peon.
It's
a strong
not
Prime
That's
Minister,
what I'm saying. Yes,
which is
the
good.
tables have turned.
And also in both cases, the wives take a back seat.
Which is very good.
Contrast to earlier time.
But
Vijita, it was a similar thing that when JR was there, she was just in the background.
However, we do see Maithripala Sirisena, President Maithripala Sirisena's son Dahan, and also his elder daughter Chatrika really making an appearance here and there, you know, going and talking to villagers, going and opening kidney water purification filters for kidney patient areas. Are these like inklings of what we can expect in the future?
It's very difficult to say. I think they may be standing in for him rather than taking over from him. I think that's the difference.
Yeah. Vijita, coming back, you were the founding editor of the Sunday Times, and you left Sunday Times because of political pressure. Due to you have an interesting story to relate, due to a common or mutual friend of ours. I think you should tell the viewers what happened with that famous Suranimala.
Yeah, sure. Lasantha Wickremesinghe came to me one day when I was at the Sunday Times and said, can I write a column for you, political column? I knew at that time that he was the secretary to Mrs. Bandaranaike.
But didn't Rain work at Sunday Times?
Yes, Rain.
She was there,
Lasantha had kept Rain there. He didn't tell me that this is the person he was going to marry. But he said, there's a nice girl who has come back from Hong Kong. Can you give her a job? So we hired Rain. It's only later I discovered.
I know Rain is watching this program from Melbourne.
Yes. But with regard to, Lasantha, he came and said, can I start this column? I said, yes. But he said, I don't want anyone to know that I am writing it, because he was Miss Bandaranaike's secretary. I said, okay. So he brought it home on Saturday morning, and my wife Lalna typed it out, and I would take it into Sunday Times office at 3 o'clock. So no one knew what was happening. But certain things that he began to write about created certain problems.
Because he had inside stories.
He had a lot of inside stories. One was with regard to Premadasa telling Sirisena Kure, can you stay back after the cabinet meeting because I want to make my cabinet. Sirisena Kure said, I don't want to cut other people's throats. Because there was this question of Gamini Disanayaka and Lalita Labudu especially. He didn't want to leave them out.
So
of the
that
cabinet.
was then Sirisena Kure said, I don't want to cut anybody's throats. But now what's happening? So much of cut throats and throat cutting happening among the cabinet and among politicians.
Throat cutting, I mean, there's so many cabinet ministers, I don't know. The contrast to that time. But that led to a lot of problems because Premadasa then began to attack me personally from stages also, public stages also. Then I was told, can you
step down?
No, I wasn't asked to step down, but I was asked whether I could suspend
the column.
Suspend the column. That I refused because I said journalists must have the right to say what they feel. That is why the public buy the newspaper, because they want to know. There are a lot of rumors that are spread. So I said, no, I'm sorry. In that case, I go out. So that's when I decided to resign, because I think an editor has a lot of responsibility.
Like Vijita, you said the editors. Now, Mahina, you have been here for long. This station have been attacked. So still, the politicians continue to interfere and like ill-treat. No journalists have killed politicians. No politicians have attacked and killed journalists. So it still continues.
But politicians do feel that their character is more or less threatened by even the simplest news that is being said. But that is
do they have characters?
But that is actually the beauty of media, isn't it? The fact that you can openly say something to somebody if you have the information, if you have the facts. It's not baseless accusations or baseless information that is being put out by the media. But we did see, as Bangla said, in the recent past, a lot of pressure on media from politicians, from political influence.
And that's why we say we report, you decide. Coming back, Mahina, now it's very interesting. Vijita has lots of stories. Then you leave the Times. Then you join hands with your good friend, Upali Vijayawardena. How did that happened?
No, that was before the island also, because that was in the late 70s. Actually, I went to interview J.R. Jayawardena for the Wall Street Journal. They wanted an article on him. And then he said, look, you've been galloping around the world because you are reporting from various places. Why don't you come and help us now with media?
Who, J.R.?
J.R. So I said, what do you want me to do? He said, we just started the GCEC.
The Greater Colombo Economic Commission.
Economic Commission, now it's called the BOI. He said, why don't you come? So I said, okay. I can assist for 1 or 2 years. So that's how I got involved with the GCEC.
You got to know Upali at that time, or you knew Upali before?
I know Upali, but he didn't know who I was or anything like that. So that's he sent my papers to Upali Jayawardena. Then I had an interview with Upali, and he asked me to come and join the GCEC. That was when the GCEC had just begun. So we through my friends in various parts of the world, we were able to get a lot of publicity for what was happening in Sri Lanka.
And Upali had political ambitions.
Upali had political
He wanted to be the president of this country. You should tell how he was more about it.
Okay. One day he said, can you arrange an interview with Far Eastern Economic Review? I said, yes, can be done. So then Manik Disilla was the correspondent at the time.
The present Sunday Island editor.
Sunday Island editor. So we had a chat. And then Manik asked him, what is your next step? There are rumors that you are going to be the president of this country. I said, what else is there? So when the article appeared, he asked me to get 6 copies. First one, he said, send it off to Uncle Dicky. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Second one, dear Preme. Same sentence. That made Premadasa furious.
But I think the person who was more worried was more than President Premadasa, Ronnie Dimel. Because I thought that Upali was a big business magnate, so he thought that he'll be the next finance minister. Wasn't that the issue?
Yes. They used to meet at Upali's house actually before JR won the elections. And there was the possibility that Upali may have been made the finance minister. But then I think JR told him, I'll make you president of the country. So I think then Upali stepped back a little bit. But that Rani always felt that Upali is there as a threat. The same thing happened with Premadasa. So that created a lot of antagonism amongst them.
Mahina, we are talking of media freedom. I mean, I was speaking to Mr. Yapa while, when we had this break, and he said, one of the newspapers he was the editor, they leaked the budget speech. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's
Weren't
right.
you threatened after that?
Well, the budget speech was brought to me the day before it was presented in Parliament, which is never. So what do? You have to decide as a journalist, are you going to put this in your paper, or are you going to wait till the budget
That's
is
one
done?
of the difficult decisions as a
Very,
journalist you
very
have to
difficult.
make. Yes.
And also the possible prosecution. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So next day, here's Ronnie's budget speech of today, and all the details, 20% devaluation, this, that, and Ronnie was furious. And for the first time, the budget speech, he had to photocopy and distribute it because he had to change everything in the night.
We should try to get some of these things in the future, Mahina.
No, but the thing
Then
is,
then the CID came,
Yeah.
and they questioned me, asked me, what happened? Who told you? I said, okay, I'll tell you. I said, who? Ronnie Dimel gave it to me. So they didn't know what to do, but they prosecuted me in the High Courts, saying that I have stolen cabinet secrets, I have tried to disrupt Sri Lanka's economy, all sorts of charges. Yes, I was personally, it was against me. So I went up and said, guilty, not guilty? I said, not guilty. Then the judge called the CID officer, Mohan Gurnatna, and said something. Then he came back and said, the judge says he cannot hear this case, so we'll have to get it transferred somewhere. So I said, why, what's the problem? He says, sitting as judge is Kirti Vijayavardhana, who was in the same dormitory as you at St. Thomas's College in Miller Chapman. So he says he can't. So then the case disappeared into the depths of Hulsdorf, because Ronnie soon after that lost his finance ministry, so he was no longer interested. CID was also not interested. So that was it.
Do you think we have media freedom now?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, because what do you mean by media freedom? Is it the freedom to attack anybody? I think what we
Freedom to criticize, freedom to have constructive criticism, freedom to express, and now Mahina, we are playing the role of the opposition now. There's no proper opposition, so we have to do that.
I think a lot of investigative journalism is what is needed today, to go into details of what is happening in the ministry, the corruption and other things, and bring it up. It's not just a question of the police exposing various things. I think sometimes the police should get the details from the journalists. I think that's really what should happen.
And the other thing is, Ms. Vijitayappa, I mean, when I was listening to your account of your days in the island and the Times, two papers that are now widely circulated in Sri Lanka, the two main newspapers in Sri Lanka, there's a huge difference, I feel, how print journalism was back then and print journalism now. Especially to do with language, there's not much proofreading of the articles. There's also, when you look at the stories, you wonder, are these really newsworthy stories to be carried on the newspapers? Also, we have social media influence, which begs the question, is there media freedom when if you go on or go online, you have so many underground websites reporting details that you don't know whether to believe or not. So talk to me about the contrast you see in journalism back then and now.
I'll reply with a very simple story. One day I had a call, Mr. Can't remember his name now, but from Nallur. You have killed me in your paper. I said, why? What has happened? You have said that I have committed suicide and that Dr. Watson performed the autopsy. It's the other way around. Dr. Watson performed the autopsy, and I had to do the investigations. So I called the sub-editor and asked what happened. The story is correct, but he has changed it. He has changed it round the other way. So what have you done? He says, because Dr. Watson is a man who makes a lot of money. So why should he commit suicide? Whereas a coroner is a poor government servant. So I thought the correspondent had got it wrong, and I changed it.
That's
So
good sub-editing.
That's good sub-editing, but for the first time in my career as a journalist, I had to carry an apology saying we apologize to Mr. Francis. Francis was his name.
But Vijita, coming back, we have, I think, not much of time. But, now see, I read in the papers today where on Geneva issue, where Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe said, you telling the media, don't misinterpret. But you think, now, media can speak to different people, get their views. Can a politician say that to the media?
He can advise, but it's really left to the media to decide what they want to do. I think that's what people expect from the media. Otherwise, why should they buy newspapers? They can just look at the news on TV or anything. So I think it's very, very important that that's why I talked about investigative journalism and that sort of thing. These must be brought into the spotlight.
Yeah, our politicians, I don't think Mahina politicians are qualified to advise the media because they don't practice what they preach. Can the media advise and tell them, get rid of your cars, get rid of your perks? Will they do that?
Well, if you continue to do that, I think it will happen. For instance, this Mayadunne and his statement that just because you're MP for a few hours, you get a car permit. I mean, that was a shocking thing.
Yeah, which he said that, when he joined Pathikadan, where later one of the, Island reported it. But then what has happened? But they're still continuing. That is what happened. I think, Mahina, we should, since we don't have much time, today is an important day, the book fair. The international book fair is
from all the journalism we now move into the next stage of your life, which is publishing.
Yeah.
And
my question is, don't you think the most widely read book today is the Facebook?
That's a good one. Well, Facebook, because it gives you visual impressions more than anything else. I mean, that accident that occurred recently with 2 buses and the presidential secretary. No, those are amazing things that, even sometimes before the news is broadcast or given details in the TV stations, these things come.
And so actually TV stations pick up from social media.
So there's a greater awareness. I think that's the important thing. Compared to earlier times, you had to wait till the newspapers came out the next day. Now, it's instantaneous. So you can't hide things. And it's very, very difficult. So I think it's a new stage in journalism. But at the same time, as far as newspapers are concerned, I think they need to go in more. Not just for present in the news, what is behind the news. I think that's the secret.
I think most newspapers and even electronic media to a certain extent only touch the surface of the iceberg. It doesn't really try to delve in. And when you look at the newspapers back from your time, it's a completely different language that is used, completely different style of writing, and also a lot of information given about a story.
And some of the people read newspapers, the editorials, to learn English at that time.
Yeah,
things have changed now, except, you have one of the Daily Island editor. That's the best editorial, you learn, and, these things have changed. But again, Mahina, coming back to books.
The book fair, yes.
Like reading Makeup a Man. Does it still happen, or TV Makeup a Man?
Well, in 1 hour's time, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe will declare open the book fair.
He's a good reader.
He's a good reader.
That world should know he reads a lot.
And also his wife, a voracious reader. And the book fair this time will go on for 10 days, unlike earlier times. Last year it was only 6 days because of various restrictions. But I think last year we had nearly 1.5 million people visiting the book fair. So I think there is a tremendous thirst, and if you come, everybody has a parcel in his hand when he goes. So that shows that there's a tremendous desire for reading and for learning.
Still, for books, if you go to the International Book Fair, I am actually guilty of this. I sit at every stall on the ground and I see through all the bookshelves and go through all the books, because you hardly get all the publishers coming to one location, and international publishers. You have Penguin there, you have Puffin, all of these publishers coming in with our local publishers, displaying their books there. You get the latest collections and even good discounts and books at a cheap rate. And for a person who loves to read, the International Book Fair is definitely and has always been the best place to go buy
never
books.
Use the Kindle. I never use the Kindle. I don't get the feeling of a book, Mahina. That's not a book to me.
Now there's a large delegation who have come from China. They've taken 18 stalls altogether. They want to translate our books into Chinese, and also Chinese books into local languages. So we are having discussions.
Not the Chinese invasion. Some politician
I
might
think
say
that's
it.
the way to do it. It's not so much a Chinese invasion as to try and get people interested in our books. Because if you look at the book world, except for Shehan, nobody who is living in Sri Lanka has been able to get an international prize.
You're talking Shehan Karunatilaka, Chinaman.
Yes,
I mean, you
Chinaman.
get Michael
Great
Ondaatje
book.
and others,
Yeah.
but they are residents of Canada. So I think that way we need to awaken the spirit. And this is why now our Swarna Pushtaka, for instance, we give 500,000 rupees to the writer of the best novel. It was awarded last week.
There you go, Mahina.
Rohila.
500,000 waiting for you.
Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunities in this country, and we are also taking part in lots of book fairs overseas, so that we popularize Sri Lankan literature
books.
overseas.
Thank you very much to Mr. Vijitayappa for talking to us today and giving us a lot of information into your career and giving us that contrast between journalism back in the 70s and 80s and journalism here in the 2000s. And also Bandula Jayaseka, thank you very much for joining us on Newsline. So we leave you with a thought about books, and to do check out the International Book Fair that's happening at the BMICH starting from today. Until when will it be held?
Till next Sunday.
Till next
You
Sunday.
got an entry pass, Mahina, for 10 days.
Oh, thank
which
you.
can-
Thank you very much. This would be very useful. So from the 18th to the 27th of September at the BMICH in Colombo. Thank you everyone for watching Newsline today on Friday. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend ahead. Take care.